Hi everyone, it's Bree. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to do a quick sit down discussion video talking about my favorite misconceptions that people have about the romance genre. I will be the first to say, I'm 32. I did not pick up my first romance until just a few weeks shy of turning 30. So unlike a lot of my romance reading friends, I didn't have that experience of getting my first romance when I was 12 from an aunt or having a mom who read romance and would like pass them on to me. I didn't have that experience. Even though I'm late to the game, I'm really happy to be here. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. It's so funny to see what people have convinced themselves about an entire genre, especially the genre that makes the most money in the fiction world. I'm guilty. I can say that some of them are ones that I have had as well. So let's chat about some of my favorite misconceptions. The first one is that romance has no plot. I was guilty of this. I told myself, as much as I wanted to read romance, you are not going to get me to spend my hard-earned money on a 300-page book that is just about two people falling in love. I just was convinced that that is what the book was about. But had I kept thinking like that, I would have completely missed out on the experience of reading a book by Kennedy Ryan. We'll talk about her Grip series. In the Grip series by Kennedy Ryan, we follow Bristol and Grip. They are an interracial couple. It's a white woman from the East Coast that comes from money who moves out to California to help her brother, who's this big musical prodigy, and she meets his best friend Grip. Now Grip, think of Kendrick Lamar, very conscious rapper slash poet, and these two hit it off immediately, and this series follows their relationship, their romance. Obviously, we know these two are going to end up together, but what Kennedy Ryan does is she just weaves together very, very important issues of what it's like to be a black man in America, with Bristol being a white woman who wants to be with this black man. They have to have these really honest and open discussions. And one thing that I thought was very important was that there were things that they found out about each other that they were like, I don't understand, I don't like it, but they both agreed that regardless of how much I don't understand, I'll always try. And I thought that that was really important. She just does a really good job of creating the conversations, especially in America, which is very diverse and very mixed race, and it's only going to get crazier and more, and it's beautiful. She creates the conversations, the dialogue that I would think mixed race couples would have to have. So it's like I would have completely missed out on such an important book if I would have continued thinking that romance had no plot. These two being from different worlds very much drives the plot to this romance, and Kennedy Ryan is a genius. It was beautiful. Next is that romance is predictable, which I honestly think any genre that you read, again, I've only been reading romance for a few years, so I was obviously reading other stuff before I came over to romance. Any book that you pick up, they are all in a way predictable. I think if you read science fiction, if you read it so much, it gets to a point where it's pretty predictable. Besides romances, I love cozy mysteries. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that I don't find cozy mysteries predictable. I pretty much know what I'm getting when I go into a cozy mystery. What's exciting though is how different each cozy mystery feels from the last one that I read. A well-written romance, what I find beautiful about the romance genre and how badass romance authors are, is that even though we know these two characters are going to end up together, they are going to get that happily ever after, if it's a really strong romance author, they are going to create such crazy conflict that you as a reader are reading it and you're like, how in the hell are these two people going to end up together? Or why would this girl want to end up with this guy? Or why would this guy want to end up with this girl? Whatever, whoever the characters are, a well-written romance, you're going to be just like, how is this going to happen? And I think even with predictability, there's something comforting in that. When I upped my first romance, it was in November, and then that following March, I went through a really, really dark mental health period. And ever since then, partially I guess why I love romance so much is because I know I'm getting that happily ever after. And for the way my depression and mental health works, it helps me to read from the perspective of a character that has something laid out in front of her that she has to work through before she can get to that happily ever after. It makes sense and it works. Even though I guess some people kind of put their noses up at predictability, it's also really comforting at the same time. The next one is that romance romances don't have any substance. So I was thinking about this, like what has been a really good book that I've read recently that is full of substance? And I had to say it was Rebel by Beverly Jenkins. I talk about this book so much, but Beverly Jenkins is a woman of color. She writes historical romances that have heroines that are Black women, which is really, really nice and refreshing to see. But Rebel, so the plot, you have Valinda, who is a woman from New York who has come to New Orleans during Reconstruction to teach newly freed people of color how to read. That's the plot. But there's so much else to the book. Obviously, there's a romance between her and our hero, Drake. And at first when we meet Valinda, she is engaged. That's a whole other plot device that is thrown into the story. She is very, in the beginning, staying true to this man that she is married to, even though we know she doesn't really believe in love. She's never really seen love. And then we meet her fiance, and it's a whole other love story on the side that was just beautiful. And it's written so well and so authentically that you are like, I want this person's story. But there's just so much going on that Beverly Jenkins masterfully writes into the story, weaves together, and ties it up at the end that there's no way that you can read this book and feel like there's no substance. Obviously, Val has come to this city and wants to teach. And as you're reading it, I just remember thinking, like, if you're from, say, New York, why would you come to New Orleans where it's so dangerous? Beverly Jenkins did such an amazing job at creating this tone of danger. It just felt so dangerous. And even the colorism, I knew nothing about like the Creoles versus the newly freed Black people. I never would have thought that there was like a colorism thing amongst them. There's so much. And that's what I think about when the thoughts cross my mind of people feeling as though there's no substance to romance. Like, you are missing out on some amazing storytelling like Mrs. Beverly Jenkins does if you continue to think that way. I think the last one is that romance is all about sex, which I find hilarious because when I first started reading romance, I read sweet, cozy romances. I did not pick up my first like sexier romance until about a year into reading romance. So I started off with Debbie Maycomber, which she writes really sweet, cozy, hopeful, inspirational romances. And then I think what's typical is you read her and then you see that she may blurb another author's book, so you pick up that. And then it just kind of goes from there. And I mention her because that just goes to show like there are romance authors out there who do not write sex into their books at all. There's even some where there is sex that's implied, but it's behind closed door. So if you don't want to jump straight into something a little steamier, you absolutely do not have to. There are tons of lines out there and authors whose stories are very clean. But even if it is a steamier romance, in my experience thus far, again, I have not read every romance out there, so I can't speak for all of them. Sex is put into the story. You're reading a romance, you're reading from the perspective of a character, and you're going through their emotional journey, whatever that journey may look like. Sex is one of the most emotional journeys that one can go on. So when an author who's doing it right writes sex into the story, I hate to say strategically, but they are strategically putting it there. The sex that is put into the story is advancing the plot. It's furthering the relationship between the two characters. Now things between them are going to be different. Now they've been intimate. They've given themselves to each other. So it changes things. In my experience, I have not walked away from a romance at this point and been like, yeah, there was sex in it, and I felt like it was just put in there to be put in there. You have to take a step back and really look at how it affected and changed the story. So those are my favorite misconceptions about the romance genre. If you are not a romance reader, let me know down in the comments below some of your thoughts as to why you do not read romance. And if you are a romance reader, what are some of the romance misconceptions that kind of tick you off when you hear people talking about them? I'd love to hear. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you in my next video. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.